Nigel Farage, like the Conservatives, has said that Keir Starmer lied. I'll ask you the same question we asked to Alex Burghart. What's your evidence that he did that deliberately? Because it is a serious charge still to make it any politician.
Well, look, I don't know whether Keir Starmer is a liar or just grossly incompetent. What I do know, Laura, is that he is totally unfit to lead this country, to tackle the big challenges that it's facing. What are we talking about this morning? What will be being discussed in number 10 today? Is it the small boats crisis? Is it the cost of fuel on forecourts? The energy bills dropping onto people's doormats? Is it bringing good jobs back to the country? Is it AI, where you've just been discussing with your panel? No. It is the ins and outs of why the Prime Minister appointed the best friend of the world's most notorious paedophile to be our ambassador in Washington. Well, and that says to me that his judgment is terrible and he's so distracted from what really matters to people out in the country. That is what Reform cares about. We don't care about the Westminster establishment pontificating from former civil servants and has-been ex-ministers.
Well,
what we care about is what is actually happening in the country.
People do also care about
suffering.
People do care about whether or not their government is truthful. Nigel Farage has said on the record, he said this on Friday, he said that Keir Starmer lied. You've just said you don't know if he lied.
Well, I know that he stood in a press conference in Hastings and said that the checks had been done. That wasn't correct, was it? So we'll find out, I guess, in the days to come, whether that was dishonest or he just didn't have a clue what was going on. But neither is good from a Prime Minister, is it?
But
so, yeah, you're saying to me, Laura, that the best we can hope for in the defence of our Prime Minister is that he's just some sort of utterly clueless passenger sat on a train, somebody else driving it, no idea where it's going.
That's not what I'm
sorry,
you.
I don't want this man as our Prime Minister. I want a strong leader like Nigel Farage who's actually going to tackle the issues facing this country.
That's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is your boss has said on the record that Keir Starmer lied, which is a serious accusation to make at anybody in public life. You're saying you don't know if he lied or not. So should your boss have waited to know more before he made that accusation?
Well, the statement that the Prime Minister made in Hastings was wrong. We now know it was wrong. He didn't pass the clearance. So, well, I don't know if he's a liar or not. What I'm saying is it doesn't actually matter.
Doesn't matter if the Prime Minister tells the truth.
I don't want the Prime Minister to be a liar, but I don't want Keir Starmer to be our Prime Minister, because what really matters to the public is someone leading this country who is focused on the issues facing the people of the country? Or are they just paralysed by the ins and outs of this process? Look at next week in Parliament. There's going to be statements, people being hauled before select committees. No one will be talking about the things that really matter. How do we get those people off welfare who don't need it? How do we stop paying foreign aid to rich countries that don't deserve it? How do we stop the small boats? Look, the sun is shining this morning. Hundreds more people will cross the English Channel. Not even from France, but from Belgium now, we learn. These are the things that people really care about. But I want to ask you
one more question on this matter. Malcolm Offord, who's Reform's leader in Scotland, told the BBC this week he didn't think Starmer should resign, but Nigel Farage has said he should resign. Who do you agree with?
He should be gone. And, you know, the best way to get rid of Keir Starmer, if his Labour backbenchers aren't going to do the job, and I think we've learnt that from what Liz Kendall said this morning, is to vote for Reform on May the 7th.
I think there's one person who's responsible for everything that's happened, and that's the Prime Minister. It was the Prime Minister's decision to appoint Peter Mandelson to the most sensitive diplomatic posting we have. And we now know that he appointed someone who was a security risk to do that very sensitive job. And ultimately, responsibility has to lie with him. We've already seen the Cabinet Office due diligence document that the Prime Minister saw that said, basically, don't appoint this guy. He's been fired twice. He's got businesses. He's had business relations in China and Russia. And he maintained his relationship with Epstein after Epstein had been sent to prison for paedophilia.
Lost his job?
I think we'll see for certain over the course of the next 2 days exactly what Ollie Robbins' side of the story is. When he goes to Select Committee on Tuesday, he's going to have a chance to speak for himself, and we'll understand exactly what went on. But as I say, Laura, what I'm certain of is that the person who is responsible for what has happened has not taken responsibility for it. And it's about time that he did.
But in terms of the senior civil servant that Downing Street has concluded was his failure, at this stage you're saying, don't know, maybe he should keep his job, maybe he shouldn't.
I have to say, on balance, I'm more inclined to think that the Prime Minister and his team are in the wrong than Ollie Robbins, but I'm waiting to see all of the facts. What we do know for certain is that the Prime Minister was in possession of more than enough information when he made the appointment, but also that he told Kemi Badenoch in the Commons in February that the security vetting had thrown up the issue of Epstein. So it appears very much that the Prime Minister was aware in February, and even if the Prime Minister knew nothing about this until last Tuesday, then he had a duty to come to the House on Wednesday or on Thursday and correct the record, which means that he has knowingly misled Parliament. The fact that he didn't do that, he was in possession of the facts, and he did not come to the House to explain that he had been in the wrong. And that, as you know,
we've just heard Liz Kendall explain that he wanted to get to the bottom of the facts, and I'm sure that will be a very lively session when he does go to Parliament tomorrow. But on Friday, your party posted a graphic online saying that Keir Starmer lied and he ought to resign. What is your evidence that Keir Starmer deliberately didn't tell the truth?
So what he said in February to Kemi in the Commons was that when she asked him about the security vetting and whether it had thrown up anything to do with Epstein, he said yes. Now that strongly suggests that he did know something in February and he's now claiming he didn't know it. And that would be a dishonesty.
But what is your evidence that he deliberately lied about the specific security vetting issue when it comes to the developed vetting, to use the jargon, which that's the issue at hand here?
If he knew in February, he's lying now, right? Because if he knew in February, he can't now say I didn't know anything about it until Tuesday.
And your party said on the record
I'm pointing to evidence
lied.
I'm pointing to Hansard. I'm pointing to what he said in the Commons and what he said to journalists. We also know that Dan Hodges from the Mail and David Maddox from the Independent raised the fact that serious flags had been raised with Mandelson's security vetting 7 months ago. So the idea that nobody knew about this, I think, is for the birds. What we're going to find out over the course of the next few days is who knew what and when. But whatever we find out, we know that the Prime Minister was in possession of enough facts when he made the appointment that he should not have made it, and he will not take responsibility for it. Everybody else is being thrown under the bus. He's lost his Chief of Staff, he's lost his Head of Comms, he's lost the Cabinet Secretary, he's now lost the Head of the Foreign Office. Why will the Prime Minister not take responsibility?
On February the 5th, the Prime Minister said security vetting gave him clearance for the role. Now, when he said that, had he or anyone in his team bothered to check that Peter Mandelson had or hadn't been given a clean bill of health? I mean, that's what he said.
If the Prime Minister had known that UK security vetting had not cleared him, the appointment would have been withdrawn. It wouldn't have mattered how close that was to the President's inauguration or any of that.
That's easy to say that now.
But I believe that because there is no way that the Prime Minister would have continued with it had he known the facts that he knows now.
And you can say that now. But my question is here, when the Prime Minister stood up after months of controversy around this appointment, having promised the country he would get to the bottom of everything that happened, having been forced by opposition parties to say that he would publish everything, had he not bothered to check what had happened with his security clearance when he stood up and told the country that it had given him clearance for the role?
And that's because he was given this, what's called developed vetting status. I think repeated questions were asked about the whole process. And as I said, Keir will set out more of that tomorrow to the House.
Well, did he ask the question? Because you've just said repeated questions were asked. If he asked the question, why did he say something wasn't true?
He was told that he'd been granted developed vetting status. That's the sort of the objective of all of this. And if he had known that UK security vetting hadn't cleared him, he would not have made that appointment. I think it's just really important to be clear about it. I think that was a failure not to tell him. I think that was wrong at the start, but also, as you know, subsequently when a number of statements were made, not just by the Prime Minister, but lots of other ministers, to the media, but also to Parliament.
But you're very clear that with hindsight, had he known, he would have withdrawn the appointment, and that's perfectly legitimate for you to say that now. But
I think it's really important to say that.
And you've said it, but what explicitly did Sir Ollie Robbins get wrong? Because the law says very clearly, we can show people that it's a bit of an obscure clause of the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act. The law says that security vetting is not a matter for ministers. It says it in black and white there.
Of course it's right that ministers aren't involved in that vetting process. That's of course right. But I think many of your viewers would think, why wasn't the Prime Minister told about what UK security vetting said? Why wasn't he told that the Foreign Office had made a different decision? And I think that's at the heart of these latest
but maybe the law's wrong. But Sir Ollie Robbins' allies might say he was following the law. He wasn't
really
allowed
important
to
here
tell what
was that
happened.
the Prime Minister was not told that. The Foreign Secretary was not told that.
Why didn't he ask, though? This was one of the most controversial decisions this government has made.
Because
why didn't he ask? At the time, and in the many, many months subsequently, when we and others have been reporting on this for a long time, and journalists asked this question back in September. And Keir Starmer still didn't ask?
Well, repeated questions were asked by Number 10 about the vetting process, and they were told he got developed vetting status. And if they'd have known that, that he hadn't been cleared by UK security vetting, he wouldn't have gone ahead with the appointment. And the Prime Minister is a man of great honesty and integrity. He has told the public and Parliament everything he knew based on the facts he was told at the time.